The crisp night air hung heavy with the scent of ancient pine, damp earth, and the raw, potent musk of an expectant pack. Moonlight, a cold, indifferent eye in the obsidian sky, spilled over the hallowed clearing, illuminating the hushed faces of the assembled wolves. Every breath was held, every shadow elongated, as the weight of an unspoken future pressed down. For Salen, the air tasted of ash and impending doom, a metallic tang of fear that coated her tongue. Her heart hammered a frantic, desperate rhythm against her ribs, a wild creature trapped within her chest, echoing the frantic, silent prayers of a woman who had given everything, only to be left with the hollow ache of expectation. She clutched the worn leather cord around her neck, its familiar texture a small comfort against the vast, terrifying emptiness expanding within her. The true betrayal wasn't in the stolen glances or the hushed conversations. It was in the silence that had replaced their shared laughter, the space that had become a chasm. Tonight, she knew, that chasm would swallow her whole. Alpha King Rathan Morrow stood before his pack, a towering figure even in the distance, his broad shoulders squared against the glow of the ceremonial fires. His presence commanded attention, a magnetic pull that resonated deep in the bones of every shifter present. But to Salen, it was no longer the familiar, comforting hum of their shared bond. It was a dissonant chord, sharp and jarring, a betrayal that echoed through her very being. She remembered the warmth of his hand, the fierce protectiveness in his eyes when he'd first called her his, the undeniable truth of a connection that had felt as ancient and unyielding as the mountains surrounding their territory. He had asked for space, for time to bear the crushing weight of his crown, and she, in her boundless love, had granted it, stepping back, fading into the periphery, a silent guardian of his peace. She had convinced herself that love, true love, could weather any storm, that distance would only make their eventual reunion sweeter, their bond stronger. Foolish, naive Salen, she had mistaken absence for patience, and quiet solitude for enduring loyalty. The pack stirred, a low murmur rippling through the crowd, as Rathan raised a hand, silencing them instantly. His voice, when it came, was deep and resonant. A sound that once made her shiver with longing, now sent a different kind of tremor through her. "My loyal pack," he began, his gaze sweeping over the faces, passing over Salen as if she were a ghost. A wisp of smoke caught in the wind. The omission was a deliberate cut, a public statement of her irrelevance before the true pronouncement. "Tonight we honor tradition. Tonight we look to the future, a future of strength, prosperity, and unbroken lineage." A collective sigh of anticipation went through the assembly. Salen's knuckles were white as she gripped the cord, the cheap leather digging into her skin, a physical manifestation of the invisible chains that bound her to this moment. Her heart pounded so hard she felt dizzy, a desperate tattoo against her ribs. This was it, the moment she had simultaneously dreaded and yearned for, a twisted hope that perhaps, against all evidence, he would still turn to her, acknowledge her, if only with a glance. The truth was a physical ache, a splinter lodged beneath her ribs, grinding against bone with every breath. He wouldn't. He couldn't. The evidence of his betrayal was too overwhelming, the scent of the other woman already clinging to his skin like a second hide, a cruel testament to his fractured loyalties. Then he moved. Not towards her, not towards the quiet space she had meticulously guarded for him, but towards the edge of the clearing where a figure, cloaked in shadow until now, stepped into the firelight. A gasp, low and collective, erupted from the pack. The woman was stunning, her hair the color of midnight, eyes like polished obsidian, and a scent, sweet, cloying, utterly foreign, yet undeniably alluring, that now mingled with Rathan's own familiar musk. It clung to him, a new, unwelcome shroud, a declaration of conquest. Her name, Roas, echoed through the clearing, whispered in awe, in admiration, in hushed curiosity. Roas, from the powerful Northern Peaks pack, known for their fierce warriors and potent bloodlines. Roas. The name tasted bitter, like ash on Salen's tongue. She was everything Salen was not. Vibrant, commanding, her wolf practically vibrating beneath her skin. A restless, powerful force demanding attention. Salen, who felt barren, wolfless. An empty vessel compared to the incandescent presence beside the Alpha King. She watched, numb, as Rethan took Royce's hand, a tender gesture that tore at the fragile remnants of Salen's composure. His gaze, once exclusively hers, once filled with a soft light meant only for her, now lingered on Russ with an intensity that made Salen's world tilt, threatening to plunge her into an abyss of despair. It was a gaze of undeniable possessiveness, a primal claim that left no room for doubt, no room for the quiet, patient Salen. A claim that solidified the erasure of her existence. "Tonight," Rethan announced, his voice ringing with a conviction that shattered Salen's last defenses, "I present to you your new Luna. Royce, of the Northern Peaks Pack, will stand by my side, guide our people, and ensure the strength of our lineage." The word struck Salen like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. New Luna, Royce, strength of our lineage. Every word was a hammer blow, crushing the fragile shards of her hope. She felt the eyes of the pack on her, not with malice, but with a pity that was far worse. Pity for the quiet, overlooked Omega, the one who had waited patiently in the shadows, only to be replaced. She could feel the subtle shift in the pack's energy, the acceptance, the anticipation of a new era. Her era, it seemed, was over before it had truly begun. The humiliation was a burning brand, searing itself onto her soul. She was not merely rejected, she was utterly erased, publicly disavowed. Her love and loyalty made a mockery. The very air around her seemed to thicken, heavy with the weight of her shame, a palpable shroud that clung to her. A wave of humiliation, hot and stinging, washed over Salen, making her cheeks flush with a barking, mortifying heat, even as her blood ran cold. She wasn't just rejected, she was utterly erased. The space she had given Rethan, the space she had thought was a testament to her love, had become the stage for her public dismissal. Her wolf, dormant for so long, remained silent, offering no comfort, no rage, just an echoing emptiness that mirrored her soul. Was she truly wolfless, or was her wolf simply too broken to even whimper, too humiliated to stir? The silence from within was a greater betrayal than Rethan's words. She wanted to run, to flee into the darkest recesses of the forest, to let the night swallow her whole, to hide from the sympathetic glances and the triumphant gleam in Ross's eyes. But her feet were rooted to the spot, trapped by the collective gaze, by the cruel finality of the Alpha King's pronouncement. She saw Royce smile, a triumphant, almost predatory curve of her lips, as she leaned into Rethan's embrace, her fingers tracing the powerful line of his jaw. It was a gesture of ownership, blatant and undeniable, and Rethan, the man who had once promised her forever, accepted it without a flicker of remorse, his eyes fixed on his new Luna, with an unwavering devotion that Salen had once believed was hers alone. The sheer audacity, the cold-blooded cruelty of it, left her breathless. A low growl, barely perceptible, rumbled from somewhere deep within the assembly. It wasn't one of approval, but of something wilder, darker, a note of primal dissent that resonated sharply within Salen's shattered core. She tried to locate its source, her eyes darting through the crowd, searching, but saw nothing specific, no individual face standing out. It was a sound that made the hairs on her arms stand on end, a fleeting disruption in the otherwise celebratory hum, unnoticed by the cheering pack. It was a strange, primal note, a brief, guttural objection that vanished as quickly as it came, leaving Salen to wonder if it had been real, or merely a phantom echo of her own suppressed pain. As the pack's cheers erupted, celebrating their new Luna, Salen felt a strange, cold resolve settle over her. The searing pain began to harden, transforming into a brittle shell around her heart. She wouldn't crumble here, not in front of them. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. With a quiet dignity that belied the storm raging inside her, she turned, her gaze sweeping over the joyous faces of the pack one last time. Her eyes landed, for a fleeting moment, on a solitary figure standing at the very edge of the clearing, half obscured by the ancient oaks. He was taller than the others, broader, and even from this distance, an aura of raw power seemed to emanate from him, a silent, watchful intensity that was almost unnerving. His face was shadowed, but she felt the weight of his gaze, a dark, piercing scrutiny that seemed to see right through her carefully constructed facade, past her pain to something deeper. A shiver, not entirely of fear, traced its way down her spine. He made no move, spoke no word, yet his presence was a stark contrast to the celebratory throng. A silent, brooding sentinel in the periphery, his eyes, even in shadow, burning with an ancient fire. Then, as quickly as their eyes had met, he was gone, swallowed by the deeper shadows of the forest, leaving Salen with an unsettling sense of having been observed, truly seen, for the first time in years. The cheers of the pack faded behind her as she walked away, each step a deliberate act of defiance, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. The familiar path home felt alien, each fallen leaf a whisper of her shattered past, and with every painful step, she felt the truth of her new reality settle over her. Exile not just from the Alpha's side, but from the very heart of the pack. She was alone, utterly and irrevocably alone, and the forest, usually a comfort, now felt like a vast, indifferent maw waiting to consume her. But as she walked deeper into its embrace, a faint, almost imperceptible warmth sparked deep within her, a tiny ember of defiance refusing to be extinguished. What was the sensation? A ghost of her wolf stirring, or something entirely new, something dangerous and untamed? The answer, she knew, lay hidden in the predatory gaze that had briefly met hers, and the path she was now forced to walk, away from everything she had ever known, into a future she could not fathom. The moon, now high above, seemed to mock her, yet its cold light also promised a wild, untamed freedom, a call to a destiny far removed from the confines of her broken past. The chill of the forest night seeped into Salen's small, secluded cottage, a cold embrace that mirrored the desolation in her soul. The familiar walls, once a sanctuary, filled with the phantom scent of Heightened and the quiet hum of anticipated futures, now felt like a tomb. Each object, a hand-carved wooden bird he'd given her, the worn blanket they'd shared by the hearth, was a sharpened splinter, digging deeper into the gaping wound of her heart. The silence was deafening, a stark contrast to the distant, celebratory howls that still echoed from the clearing, a morbid symphony of her undoing. She slid down the rough-hewn door, her knees weak, the raw edges of her humiliation flaying her. She had been a fool, a quiet shadow waiting for a light that would never return, sacrificing her own essence for a bond that had proven as fragile as frosted glass. The world, once vibrant with the promise of a shared future, was now a desolate wasteland, and she, a solitary figure, abandoned within it. She curled into herself, shivering not just from the cold, but from the visceral understanding that her life, as she knew it, was irrevocably over. Heightened had not just taken another Luna, he had stripped Salen of her identity, her purpose, her very place within the pack. As an Omega unmated and now publicly rejected by the Alpha King, she was little more than an outcast, a burden, a ghost haunting the edges of a territory that no longer welcomed her. The whispers about her wolflessness, her barrenness, would no longer be just whispers. They would be shouts, justifications for her dismissal, her supposed lack of a wolf. A cruel twist of fate that had plagued her since her first shift now felt like a curse, confirming her unworthiness. Where was the fierce beast within, the primal core that should have roared in defiance, in pain? Only silence, a profound, terrifying emptiness. Yet a faint memory persisted from the clearing, that fleeting warmth, that spark deep within her, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. If ever, it was quickly overshadowed by the crushing weight of her despair, but it lingered, a tiny, defiant ember in the ruins of her spirit. And then, the memory of that solitary figure, half hidden by the ancient oaks, his gaze like a brand, searing through her carefully constructed composure. His presence had been unsettling, powerful, almost predatory, yet for a split second she had felt seen, truly seen. The thought was a strange anomaly in her grief, a curious deviation she couldn't quite reconcile. Who was he? Why had his dark gaze felt like a touch, a fleeting connection in a moment of utter isolation? The first rays of dawn, pale and hesitant, crept through the small window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the cold air. Salen had not slept. Her eyes burned, her body ached, but her mind was a frantic kaleidoscope of shattered memories and chilling predictions. She knew she couldn't stay in this cottage, not truly. It was within pack lands, and her presence would be a constant, uncomfortable reminder of Rethan's broken vow. She had to leave, to disappear, but where could an Omega, a supposedly wolfless one, go? The wild lands beyond the territory were harsh, unforgiving, teeming with dangers that even a strong wolf would hesitate to face alone. For her, it felt like a death sentence. A faint scent, foreign yet compelling, drifted through the cracks in her door. Not Rethan's, certainly not Royce's cloying sweetness. This was deeper, wilder, a scent of ancient forests, of raw, untamed power, mingled with something metallic, like old blood, and a faint, almost imperceptible whisper of smoke. It was the scent of the man from the clearing, she realized with a jolt. A primal recognition that prickled her skin. It was strong, too strong for him to be merely passing by. He was close. The thought was both terrifying and strangely exhilarating, an unexpected jolt of adrenaline cutting through the fog of her sorrow. Driven by a desperate need for fresh air, for anything to break the suffocating silence of her grief, Ceylin pushed herself up. Her legs felt like lead, but she forced herself to move, to perform the mundane tasks that anchored her to reality. She fetched water from the well, the cold bucket heavy in her hands, the familiar routine a dull balm. As she walked, her senses, usually dulled by her lack of an active wolf, seemed to sharpen. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent a jolt through her. She was being watched. The conviction was absolute, not paranoia, but a deep, instinctual knowing that made her hair stand on end. She could feel the subtle shift in the pack's attitude already. As she passed a few other shifters on her way back to the cottage, their eyes darted away, their greetings curt, almost dismissive. The pity she had felt last night had curdled into awkward avoidance. She was an embarrassment, a living testament to their Alpha King's ruthlessness. No one offered help. No one met her gaze for more than a fleeting, uncomfortable second. She was already in exile, even within the supposed safety of the pack. Returning to her cottage, Ceylin found a small, freshly killed rabbit laid neatly on her doorstep. Her breath hitched. It was a clean kill, almost surgically precise, no obvious marks of a struggle. Hunters often left prey for the elderly or infirm, but this felt different. It was too pristine, too deliberate. The rabbit's fur was still warm, a faint pulse of life clinging to it. And clinging to the fur, barely noticeable, was that same wild, smoky scent, undeniably the mysterious Alpha's. Her hand trembled as she picked it up, her fingers brushing against the soft fur. It was an offering, a warning, a silent declaration. She didn't know, but a shiver, a strange blend of fear and a bewildering sense of being cared for, traced its way down her spine. No one in the pack would leave her such a gift now. This was from him. That night, unable to eat, unable to rest, Ceylin found herself drawn to the edge of the forbidden forest. The ancient trees loomed, their branches like skeletal fingers, against the bruised purple of the twilight sky. Beyond the marked territory, legends spoke of rogue shifters, of ancient curses, of places where the veil between worlds thinned. It was dangerous, forbidden, especially for one as vulnerable as her. Yet a pull, a strange, almost magnetic force, urged her forward. It wasn't despair, not entirely. It was a burgeoning curiosity, a flicker of defiance, an urgent need to escape the suffocating walls of her humiliation. She walked deeper into the woods, the familiar paths giving way to untrodden ground, the sounds of the distant pack fading into an eerie silence. The air grew colder, heavier, charged with an ancient energy. The trees here were older, their roots gnarled and thick, stretching like grasping claws across the forest floor. Moonlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, casting the woods in deep, shifting shadows. The further she went, the stronger that peculiar, wild scent became, the smoky tang laced with something else now, something primal and deeply masculine, a scent that resonated with a forgotten part of her, stirring that faint warmth again, this time with a more insistent thrum. It was almost as if the forest itself was calling to her, or rather, he was. She stopped, her senses stretched taut, every nerve ending tingling. The air vibrated with a silent tension. She knew she shouldn't be here. This was not her place, not the safe, familiar woods of her childhood. This was the wild, a place of tooth and claw, where unmated omegas did not survive. Yet she felt a strange sense of belonging, a raw, untamed comfort in the silence. Then she saw it. Not a person, not a wolf, but a sign, scratched deeply into the bark of an ancient oak, almost too high to reach, were 3 parallel claw marks, long and impossibly deep, still weeping sap. Beneath them, etched with the same powerful force, was a symbol she didn't recognize. A stylized, spiraling knot, vaguely reminiscent of an ancient runic script, radiating a strange, almost hypnotic energy. It was a marker, a warning, a declaration, but for whom? And why here? As she reached out a trembling hand to touch the raw wood, the air around her thickened, growing colder, yet that insistent warmth within her own chest flared, a fierce, protective beat. A low growl, deep and guttural, echoed from the darkness just beyond the tree line, not threatening, but possessive, a territorial claim that vibrated through the very ground beneath her feet. It was closer than she thought, much, much closer. And she realized with a sudden, chilling certainty that she had walked directly into his domain. He wasn't just watching her. He had led her here. The forest was his, and she, an uninvited trespasser, was now utterly at his mercy. Her heart hammered, not just with fear, but with a strange, undeniable thrill. Her dormant wolf, for the first time in years, truly stirred, a low primal purr rumbling deep within her, a response to the wild, untamed call of a true alpha. This was not Rethan's weak claim. This was the raw, ancient power of the wild. And she, the supposedly wolfless omega, was inexplicably drawn to it. The low growl, deep and guttural, vibrated through the very roots of the ancient forest, a sound that was both a warning and a potent declaration. It was closer than Salen thought, so close it felt as if the rumble resonated from within her own chest, stirring that inexplicable warmth. Her breath hitched, fear coiling in her gut, yet intertwined with it was a strange, almost intoxicating sense of anticipation. Every primal instinct screamed at her to flee, to turn and run from the raw power emanating from the shadows, but her feet remained rooted, drawn by an invisible thread. The air grew thick, charged with an ancient energy, the scent of wood smoke, wet earth, and untamed wolf intensifying, filling her lungs with a heady, dangerous perfume. Then he emerged, not with a sudden burst of speed, but with a deliberate, unhurried grace that spoke of absolute confidence. He stepped from the deepest shadows beneath the gnarled oaks, a figure so imposing he seemed to dwarf the towering trees around him. His frame was immense, broader than any alpha Seelan had ever seen, his muscles rippling beneath worn leather and dark furs, a testament to a life lived in the unforgiving wild. His hair, dark as raven's wings, was long and unbound, streaked with silver at the temples, framing a face that was both harshly beautiful and terrifyingly scarred. A deep, jagged scar bisected his left brow, disappearing into his hairline, and another, more fearsome one, pulled at the corner of his mouth, giving him a perpetual, almost predatory sneer. His eyes, though, were what truly held her captive, 2 pools of molten gold, burning with an ancient, untamed fire that seemed to pierce directly into her soul, seeing every secret, every sorrow, every hidden flicker of defiance. They were the eyes of a king, but not of a civilized court. These were the eyes of a sovereign forged in the heart of the wilderness. He stopped mere feet from her, close enough for her to feel the radiating heat of his body, the sheer force of his presence. He was the epitome of wildness, a creature of primal strength and silent menace. He didn't speak, didn't move, simply stood there, watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle and her heart gallop. She was utterly exposed, a trembling fawn before a fully grown, magnificent predator. Her wolf, usually a phantom, now thrummed with a nervous energy, a low, persistent hum deep within her, a response to his sheer, untamed power. It was a terrifying sensation, this awakening within her, a primal recognition that transcended fear. "You stray far from your pack's broken fence, little Omega," his voice rumbled, a low growl that resonated deep in her bones. A sound rough as gravel, yet laced with an unexpected depth, a haunting melody that sent shivers down her spine. It was a voice that commanded, yet held a strange magnetic pull. He had seen her, truly seen her, not just as a rejected woman, but as an omega, a designation that for her had always been synonymous with worthlessness. But in his voice, it sounded different, almost like a challenge. Salen swallowed, her throat dry. She tried to speak, but no words would form. Her tongue felt heavy, useless. The humiliation from Rithan's betrayal, the shame of her supposed wolflessness, all coalesced into a suffocating lump in her throat. She, who had no wolf to speak for her, could not even find her human voice. He took another slow step forward, his golden eyes never leaving hers, and Salen instinctively flinched, a small, involuntary movement of retreat. He noticed a fleeting flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. "Afraid, little one?" he mused, his voice carrying a hint of dark amusement. "Good, fear keeps the weak alive. But you are not so weak, are you? Not truly." He reached out a hand, massive and scarred, his fingers long and calloused, yet surprisingly gentle, as they brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. The touch sent an electric current through her, a jolt that went straight to her core, igniting that ember within her chest into a sudden, consuming blaze. It was terrifying, exhilarating, a primal connection that bypassed all logic, all reason. Her entire body trembled, not just from fear, but from the sheer force of the connection. The scent of him enveloped her then. Raw earth, ancient forest, and a smoky hint of something wild and dangerous. A scent that now mingled with a faint, almost imperceptible undertone of old blood and loneliness. It was a scent that marked him as an outcast, a king who ruled over his own desolate domain. "You carry the mark of a queen," he murmured, his thumb tracing a phantom line across her forehead, the very spot where Luna's binding mark would normally appear. His gaze intensified, delving deeper, as if searching for something hidden within her. A hidden one, buried beneath the dust of neglect. Salen stared at him, bewildered. A queen? She was a discarded omega, stripped of any claim, any future. What was he talking about? I have no mark," she whispered, her voice barely audible, raw and shaky. "I have no wolf. I am nothing." The words were bitter, a lifetime of self-loathing bubbling to the surface. He let out a low, disarming chuckle, a sound that held no humor, only a deep, resonant rumble that shook the air. "Nothing, no, little one. You are merely unawakened, unclaimed by the foolish, unseeing eyes of those who prefer gilded cages to true power." His golden eyes flared, a fierce, protective light igniting within them. "But the wild sees differently." He moved his hand from her face, letting it hover just above her chest, directly over her heart. She could feel the heat radiating from his palm, a potent warmth that seemed to seep into her very core. And then, for the first time in years, she felt it distinctly, a pulse, a faint thrumming from deep within her, a response to his proximity, his touch, his ancient power. It was her wolf, stirring, waking from its long slumber, not with a roar, but with a tentative, curious stretch. A gasp escaped her lips, a sound of pure shock and dawning wonder. "You feel it, don't you?" he murmured, his voice softer now, almost tender, yet still laced with that underlying current of primal command. The echo of what they tried to suppress. The wild heart they claimed was barren. His gaze hardened, turning from her to look back towards the distant lights of Rethan's pack territory. A flicker of something dark, dangerous, crossed his face, a shadow of ancient grievances, of battles fought and lost, or perhaps of battles yet to come. "They called you wolfless, barren, cast you aside for a lesser claim, but the forest doesn't lie. The earth doesn't forget its true children." He paused, his eyes sweeping over her form, lingering on the subtle tremble of her hands, the rapid pulse at her throat. "My name is Volkov," he stated, his voice now crisp, definitive, a name that felt as ancient and elemental as the forest itself. "And this is my domain, a place where the true wolves still run, where claims are forged in blood and loyalty, not whispered lies and convenient betrayals." He took another step, closing the remaining distance between them, until his towering form overshadowed hers completely. The sheer masculine power of him was overwhelming, intoxicating. His scent, once just a distant wildness, now wrapped around her, claiming her senses, mingling with her own fading fear, replacing it with a strange, fierce belonging. You wandered into my woods, Salen, knowing the dangers, knowing you were alone. Why? His voice was a soft challenge, demanding an honest answer, piercing through the layers of her self-deception. I had nowhere else to go, she finally managed, her voice still shaky, but imbued with a new, quiet strength she didn't know she possessed. They cast me out. Wraithen. He broke his vow and I couldn't stay. The words tumbled out, raw and painful, a confession laid bare before this formidable stranger. Volkov's golden eyes narrowed, a cold fury flickering in their depths as she spoke Wraithen's name. It was clear he knew of the Alpha King, and their histories, whatever they were not amicable. A broken vow, he repeated, the words laced with a venomous disdain. A weakness of character, a king who cannot hold his own is no king at all. His gaze returned to her, softening slightly, but still burning with an intense, assessing fire. And you, little Omega, are no longer bound by his treachery. You are free. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the delicate bones of her wrist, and the warmth within her flared even brighter, spreading through her veins like liquid fire. It wasn't just physical heat. It was an emotional resonance, a feeling of being truly recognized, truly claimed, in a way Wraithen never had, even in their most intimate moments. This was a primal connection, undeniable, visceral, a tethering of two lost souls on the edge of the wild. The forest has always provided sanctuary for the wronged, Volkov murmured, his voice a low, hypnotic rasp that seemed to echo from the very heart of the ancient trees. But sanctuary comes with a price. And a choice. He paused, his gaze fixed on hers, piercing and unwavering. You feel your wolf stir, yes? The one they said was dead? This forest, this wildness, it awakens things. It strips away the lies and reveals the truth. But the truth can be a dangerous thing. Are you ready to face it, Salen? Are you ready to claim what is truly yours? He squeezed her hand gently, his touch a silent question, a potent challenge. The moon, now high above the canopy, cast eerie, shifting shadows around them, transforming the forest into a living, breathing entity, humming with unseen energies. Salen looked into his burning golden eyes, the raw power of him overwhelming, yet she felt a flicker of courage, a nascent strength she hadn't known she possessed. Her wolf, still a silent hum, was growing stronger, its presence undeniably real, a living, breathing part of her that was responding to him. She was no longer just Salen, the rejected Omega. She was something else, something primal, something wild, standing at the precipice of a choice that would redefine her very existence. The forest was silent, holding its breath, waiting for her answer. His grasp tightened almost imperceptibly, a possessive anchor in the swirling chaos of her emotions, as if he already knew her choice, as if he had already claimed her, body and soul. The raw, untamed power radiating from him promised both danger and a liberation she had never dared to dream of. And as the moonlight caught the ancient symbol carved into the tree, she felt a profound, irrevocable shift deep within her bones. The forest held its breath, waiting for Salen's answer, yet her own felt lodged in her throat. Volkov's golden eyes, blazing with an ancient, untamed power, pierced through her carefully constructed walls, demanding not just a response, but a primal surrender. His hand, still grasping hers, was a tether to a wildness she had only ever glimpsed in fragmented dreams, a world far removed from the stifling rules of Wraithen's pack. Fear, cold and sharp, still pricked at her, but it was now laced with an intoxicating current of defiance, a desperate hunger for belonging that she hadn't realized she possessed until this very moment. Wraithen's betrayal had stripped her bare, leaving her vulnerable, but in that raw exposure, a new seed of courage had taken root. Yes, she whispered, the word barely a breath, yet it felt like a roar echoing through the silent woods. It was a choice born of desperation, yes, but also of a burgeoning hope, a reckless leap of faith into the unknown. I am ready. Her voice, though still trembling, held a nascent resolve, a promise to herself that she would no longer be the quiet, discarded Omega. A flicker of something akin to approval, or perhaps satisfaction, softened the harsh lines of Volkov's scarred face. His grip tightened for a moment, a silent acknowledgement before he released her hand, the sudden absence of his touch leaving a surprising chill. "Then follow me, Salen of the Broken Vow," he rumbled, turning without another word, his powerful form melting into the deeper shadows of the ancient trees. She followed, her gaze fixed on the broad expanse of his back, the muscles shifting beneath the worn furs with every silent step. The forest, which had felt menacing just moments before, now seemed to part for them, revealing hidden paths, unseen passages. Volkov moved with an effortless grace that spoke of centuries spent in the wild, his senses acutely attuned to every whisper of the wind, every rustle of a leaf. Salen, in contrast, stumbled, her human feet unused to the uneven terrain, her eyes struggling to adapt to the shifting moonlight. She was a creature of domesticity, thrust into a world of primal instinct, and the contrast was stark, almost humiliating. They walked for what felt like hours, deeper and deeper into the forbidden territory, away from the distant fading lights of her former home. The air grew colder, the scent of damp earth and ancient pine more pervasive, mingling with Volkov's distinctive wild musk. Her legs ached, her lungs burned, but she pushed through, fueled by a stubborn refusal to fall behind, to prove herself unworthy of his, whatever this was, his reluctant sanctuary. Finally, they reached a clearing far more secluded than the ceremonial grounds of Rathan's pack. Here, the trees formed a natural amphitheater around a massive gnarled oak, its branches reaching like skeletal arms towards the sky. Before it, nestled into a natural rock formation, was a cave, its entrance partially obscured by hanging vines and dense undergrowth. It was not a grand dwelling, but it exuded a raw, ancient power, a sense of being deeply connected to the earth. A faint wisp of smoke curled from a hidden vent above, hinting at a hearth within. "This is my den," Volkov stated, his voice devoid of pride, yet laced with an undeniable sense of ownership. He gestured towards the cave entrance. "Your new sanctuary, for now." Salen hesitated at the threshold, a tremor running through her. It was dark, primal, a stark contrast to her cozy, if now desolate, cottage. But the warmth from the hidden fire within was inviting, and the thought of shelter, of rest, outweighed her apprehension. She stepped inside, her senses immediately assaulted by the rich scent of wood smoke, old stone, and Volkov's pervasive, masculine musk. The cave was surprisingly spacious, with a rough-hewn central fire pit, where embers still glowed, casting flickering shadows across the walls. Animal furs, thick and luxurious, served as bedding on a raised stone ledge, and various hunting implements hung from pegs. It was a dwelling of pure utility, of survival, yet it held an austere beauty. Volkov moved to the fire, stoking it to life with practiced ease, the crackle and pop of the flames a welcome sound in the silence. He didn't offer comfort, didn't speak of her past or his own. He simply existed, a powerful, silent presence that filled the cave. Salen found a spot on a smaller, empty ledge, trying to make herself inconspicuous, acutely aware of his every movement. The contrast between his effortless power and her own exhaustion was a harsh reminder of her vulnerability. As the fire grew, casting dancing light, Salen finally allowed herself to truly look at him, her gaze lingering on the scars that marred his face and arms. Each one told a story of brutal battles, of survival against impossible odds. He was a warrior, a survivor, a king of this untamed wilderness. She wondered what kind of life he had lived, what forces had forged such a formidable, solitary being, and why did he choose to live alone, away from any pack? The question hung in the air, unspoken but heavy between them. A sudden rumble from her stomach broke the silence, a mortifying sound that made her cheeks flush. Volkov turned, a faint, almost imperceptible curve of his scarred lips. "Hungry, little Omega?" he asked, his golden eyes glinting in the firelight. He retrieved a piece of roasted meat from a hide bag, its rich, savory scent making her mouth water. It was venison, still warm. He tore a generous portion with his bare hands, his movements economic and powerful, and offered it to her. "Here," he rumbled, holding it out. "Eat. You'll need your strength." Salen took the meat, her fingers brushing his, and again that electric current shot through her, igniting the dormant wolf within. It was a simple act, a primal gesture of provision, yet it resonated deeply, a stark contrast to Rathan's grand, empty promises. Rathan had offered her a crown. Volkov offered her sustenance, survival, and a direct, undeniable acknowledgement of her needs. She ate, tearing at the meat with a hunger she hadn't realized she possessed, the wild taste a revelation on her tongue. It was the most satisfying meal she had eaten in years. Later, as the fire settled into a comforting glow, Salen sat by its warmth, feeling the exhaustion finally begin to claim her. Volkov sat opposite her, his back against the cool stone, his eyes fixed on the flickering flames, seemingly lost in thought. He was a silent guardian, his presence a heavy, protective blanket. She felt surprisingly safe here, in this rough, primal den, safer than she had felt in the heart of Rathan's pack. "Why are you alone?" she finally dared to ask, her voice soft, barely disturbing the quiet of the cave. The words felt reckless, intrusive, but a desperate curiosity compelled her. Volkov's gaze slowly shifted from the fire to her, his golden eyes unreadable. He considered her for a long moment, a silent assessment that made her heart beat a little faster. "Some choose solitude," he finally said, his voice a low rumble. "Some are forced into it. And some are simply too wild to be tamed by the weak." A shadow, ancient and profound, crossed his scarred face, a fleeting glimpse into a past that was clearly fraught with pain and conflict. "My blood runs older than Rathan's, Salen. My lineage, a branch they tried to prune, but could not sever. They fear what they cannot control, and I refuse to be controlled." His words, cryptic as they were, hinted at a deeper story, a history of power struggles and ancient feuds, a world far more complex and dangerous than the one she had known. He was not just an outcast. He was a king in exile, or perhaps a king who had chosen his own throne in the wild. As she drifted toward sleep, nestled amongst the furs he provided, a strange sensation prickled at her skin. Her senses, once dulled, were now painfully acute. She could hear the faint scurry of mice deep within the cave walls, the distant hoot of an owl, the rustle of leaves outside the entrance, movements she would have never noticed before. The scent of pine and earth was stronger, richer, and Volkov's own wild musk was a constant, comforting anchor. It was as if a veil had been lifted, exposing her to a world of sensory detail she had been blind to. This awakening of her senses, this heightened perception was undeniable proof. Her wolf was stirring. It wasn't a full shift, not yet, but it was there, a growing presence, a hum of raw power deep within her core. She looked at Volkov, silhouetted against the dying embers of the fire, his profile harsh, powerful, yet strangely compelling. He was watching her, she realized, his golden eyes burning with an intensity that sent a fresh wave of heat through her. He saw the shift, the subtle changes, the burgeoning wolf within her. He was not just giving her sanctuary. He was awakening her, drawing out the hidden strength that Rathan had dismissed. And in his gaze, she saw not pity, but a fierce, possessive recognition, a silent claim that resonated with the deepest parts of her soul. Her eyes closed, but the world around her remained vividly alive, a symphony of wild sounds and potent scents. The last thought she had before sleep claimed her was of Volkov, of his raw power, his ancient scars, and the undeniable truth that in his wild, dangerous world, she was beginning to feel truly alive for the first time. She was no longer just Salen, the rejected Omega. She was something more, something new, something dangerous. And as the hunter's moon, a sliver of silver in the dark sky, cast its cold, watchful gaze over the wildwood, Salen felt a profound, almost terrifying shift in her destiny, tethered now to the powerful, scarred sovereign who watched over her sleep. The question was not if her wolf would awaken, but when, and what raw, untamed power would unleash itself from the depths of her soul. The crisp morning air in Volkov's den tasted different. It carried the earthy dampness of the cave, the rich scent of extinguished embers, and the pervasive, intoxicating musk of the alpha, who slept coiled on his furs across the fire pit. Salen stirred, her senses alive, a symphony of subtle sounds and smells that had previously been muffled by her human self. She heard the soft drip of water deep within the cavern, the faint rustle of leaves at the entrance, and the slow, steady beat of Volkov's powerful heart. a resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate through the very stone beneath her. Her wolf, no longer a phantom, pulsed with a quiet, undeniable presence deep within her, a nascent power stretching its limbs, eager to explore this newly awakened world. She watched Volkov sleep, his scarred face softened by repose, yet still etched with the weight of ancient burdens. He was a creature of raw power, a stark contrast to Rethan's polished political facade. Where Rathan had offered her a gilded cage and then dismissed her from it, Volkov offered the freedom of the wild, and with it, a terrifying yet exhilarating responsibility to truly live. The fear she'd initially felt in his presence had not entirely vanished, but it was now tempered by a profound curiosity and an undeniable pull, a recognition that hummed in her blood. He had given her sanctuary, food, and most crucially, he had seen the truth of her, the wolf she had believed was lost. As the first slivers of dawn painted the cave entrance with bruised light, Volkov's golden eyes snapped open, instantly alert. There was no grogginess, no hesitation. He was simply awake, fully present, his gaze immediately finding hers. A shiver traced its way down Salen's spine, a mix of apprehension and a strange, almost sensual awareness. He had been a silent, brooding presence, a guardian in the night, and now, in the stark light of morning, his intensity was palpable. "You slept," he rumbled, his voice rough with sleep, yet still carrying that deep, resonant power. It wasn't a question, but an observation, a statement that acknowledged her vulnerability and his own watchfulness. "Yes," Salen managed, her voice still a little husky. "Thank you." He merely nodded, pushing himself up with an effortless grace that belied his massive frame. "The wild does not wait for sleep," he stated, his eyes already assessing her. "Today, you learn to see through its eyes, to hear with its ears." He led her out into the cold, dewy forest, the air crisp and biting. The morning light filtered through the dense canopy in shifting patterns, illuminating spiderwebs spun with diamond dew. Volkov moved silently, a shadow among shadows, forcing Salen to push her own limits, to mimic his stealth. He pointed out tracks she would have completely missed before. A deer's delicate hoofprint in the soft earth, the faint scuff of a badger's claw on bark. Her senses, still adjusting, slowly began to pick up these subtle clues, painting a richer, more vibrant picture of the forest around them. "Listen," he commanded, his voice barely a whisper. Yet it cut through the morning sounds. Not just to the wind, but to the whispers it carries, the warnings, the hunger. Salen closed her eyes, focusing, straining. She heard the distant chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves, but then beneath it, something else. A faint, high-pitched squeak, followed by a sudden, muffled thud. Her eyes flew open. "A mouse?" she murmured, surprised at her own perception. "And something caught it?" Volkov's scarred lips curved into a rare, faint smile. "Good, your ears remember. Now your nose." He led her deeper, into a patch of dense undergrowth, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. "What do you smell?" he challenged, his voice low, close to her ear, sending another jolt through her. Salen inhaled, struggling to distinguish the myriad odors, pine, moss, wet stone, then something else, something metallic, warm, and distinctly animal. "Blood," she whispered, her brow furrowed. "And something like fear." "A deer?" Volkov nodded, his gaze unwavering, almost approving. "Fresh. A kill from the night, and yes, the fear still lingers in the air, a ghost of its passing. You feel it, don't you? The life that was here, the life that left." He was pushing her, not just to observe, but to feel, to connect with the raw, brutal cycle of life and death in the wild. Her wolf, excited by the challenge, pulsed with a stronger rhythm, a yearning to fully immerse itself in this primal world. The contrast to her former life, where she had been encouraged to be silent, to be demure, was stark. Here, with Volkov, her instincts were valued, celebrated, almost. They spent hours tracking, observing, learning. Volkov's patience was immense, his teachings profound, revealing a deep reverence for the forest and its creatures. He moved with an effortless power, a silent king surveying his domain, and Salen found herself watching him, mesmerized by his strength, by the raw intelligence in his golden eyes. He was not just a powerful alpha, he was a sage, a conduit to the ancient wisdom of the wild. As the sun began its descent, casting long golden shadows through the trees, they came across a small, clear stream. Volkov knelt, cupping the water in his hands, his gaze fixed on the reflection. "Drink," he offered, his voice softer than she'd heard it all day. And look, Ceylin knelt beside him, the cool water a balm to her parched throat. She dipped her hands in, splashing her face, and then looked into the reflective surface, and gasped. Her eyes, usually a soft, unassuming hazel, were now flecked with gold, tiny sparks of molten light dancing within them. The change was subtle, almost imperceptible to the untrained eye, but undeniable. And beneath her left ear, just along her jawline, a faint, almost invisible mark shimmered, a delicate, spiraling knot, echoing the ancient symbol she'd seen carved into the oak tree. What is this?" she whispered, touching the mark, her fingers trembling. Her wolf surged, a wave of powerful energy rushing through her, hot and potent. Volkov reached out, his large, calloused thumb gently tracing the spiraling design. The contact sent a shockwave through her, a primal current that ignited every nerve ending. His touch was both possessive and reverent, a claim without words. "The mark of the wild," he rumbled, his voice a deep, resonant hum that seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her soul. "The awakening, your wolf, Ceylin. It remembers its true nature." His golden eyes, now blazing with an almost fierce triumph, met hers in the reflection. "And the gold in your eyes, that is the mark of a true alpha, a lineage stronger than Wraithen's broken bloodline could ever comprehend. You are not barren, little Omega. You are fertile with raw power, a queen, not of men, but of the untamed spirit." Her heart hammered, a frantic drum against her ribs. Alpha, queen, these were not words she associated with herself, not with the quiet, discarded Omega. Yet looking into her own eyes, seeing the undeniable golden flecks, feeling the vibrant hum of her wolf, she knew it was true. Something profound was shifting within her, a metamorphosis unfolding under Volkov's watchful, commanding gaze. He continued to trace the mark, his touch possessive, undeniable. "This mark, it will draw attention, not just from me, but from others who feel the pull of true power, and it will draw the ire of those who fear it." His voice hardened, a dangerous edge entering his tone. "Wraithen's pack will sense this shift in the forest. They will know something powerful is stirring, and they will seek to control it or destroy it." He lifted her chin, his gaze intense, piercing, seeing into the very depths of her soul. "You are no longer an Omega, Ceylin. You are a nascent alpha, a true wolf awakened. And with that awakening comes a choice, to hide, to flee, to allow them to extinguish this fire within you, or to claim it. To fight for it, to embrace the wild queen you were always meant to be." His thumb, still resting on her jawline, moved slightly, brushing over the newly visible mark. A sudden, overwhelming surge of heat flared through her, a primal recognition, and she felt a deep, undeniable connection to him, to the raw power he embodied. It wasn't just physical attraction, it was a soul-deep resonance, a bond forming in the wild, forged in the fires of awakening. Then he leaned closer, his scent enveloping her, intoxicating and dangerous. His breath ghosted across her lips, warm and potent. "But know this," he murmured, his voice a low primal growl that sent shivers of both fear and desire through her. "The moment you truly claim it, truly embrace your wolf, you will be mine to protect, mine to guide, mine to keep." His golden eyes locked onto hers, burning with an unspoken promise, a possessive declaration that left no room for doubt. The forest around them seemed to hold its breath, every sound muted, every shadow still. He was not asking, he was claiming, and in that moment, beneath the awakening mark and the gaze of the scarred sovereign, Ceylin felt an undeniable pull toward the wild, a fierce, desperate yearning to surrender to his primal claim, to the destiny he offered. Just as his lips were about to meet hers, a sudden sharp snap of a twig echoed from the deeper shadows of the forest, too deliberate to be an animal, too close to be ignored. Volkov's head snapped up, his golden eyes hardening, blazing with a dangerous fury. He pushed Salen gently but firmly behind him, his body a shield, his gaze piercing the darkening woods. Someone was watching, someone had followed them, and Volkov's protective stance, the barely suppressed growl vibrating in his chest, promised a brutal defense of his newly found charge. The sharp snap of the twig tore through the twilight quiet, an unnatural sound in the ancient hush of the forest. Volkov's head snapped up, his golden eyes blazing, instantly transforming from intense desire to lethal alertness. He moved with a speed that defied his massive size, pushing Salen gently but firmly behind him, his body a solid, unyielding shield against the unseen threat. A low, guttural growl vibrated from deep in his chest, a sound that was less a warning and more a promise of brutal retaliation. The air around them crackled with his raw power, a predatory aura that made the hairs on Salen's arms stand on end, yet paradoxically filled her with a profound sense of safety. Fear, cold and sharp, seized her, but it was different now. It was not the paralyzing terror of the discarded Omega, but the protective instinct of a nascent wolf, a fierce current that pulsed through her veins, urging her to defend, to fight, to protect him. The mark beneath her ear tingled, a faint warmth spreading, and she could feel her senses sharpen. The scent of pine and damp earth, now laced with a faint cloying sweetness, unmistakably the scent of Rethan's pack. Not Rathan himself, but his wolves. Scouts. They had found them. Volkov stood utterly still, a statue of coiled power, his gaze piercing the darkening woods. The silence stretched, heavy and tense, punctuated only by the frantic beat of Salen's heart. Then, a figure stepped from the shadows, followed by another and another. 3 wolves, larger than average, their faces grim, their eyes fixed on Volkov, with a mixture of apprehension and forced bravado. They were beta-level warriors from Rethan's inner circle, recognizable by the faded scar patterns on their cheeks. Volkov, the lead scout, a burly male named Cade, growled, his voice laced with disdain. Always skulking in the shadows, the king wishes to know why you harbor one of his pack. His eyes, cold and assessing, flickered to Salen, lingering on her for a fraction of a second too long, and Salen instinctively pressed closer to Volkov's back. She is no longer of his pack. Volkov's voice rumbled, low and dangerous, each word a stone dropped into a deep well. And you trespass on my land, Cade. Turn back, or face the consequences. Cade scoffed, a sneer twisting his lips. Your land? The king's decree covers all these woods, rogue. And as for the Omega, she is an outcast, wolfless, barren. Of no use to anyone, especially not a wild relic like you. His gaze dropped to the mark on Salen's jaw, his eyes widening almost imperceptibly, a flicker of something unsettling crossing his face. What is that? Before Cade could finish, Volkov moved. It was a blur of motion, a primal surge of power. One moment, he was a silent guardian. The next, he was a whirlwind of controlled ferocity. He slammed into Cade with the force of a battering ram, sending the beta warrior sprawling. Cade barely had time to let out a grunt of surprise before Volkov was on him. A flash of golden eyes, a blur of massive paws. There was no shift, no full transformation, but the raw power of his wolf was unmistakable, flowing through his human form, making him an unstoppable force. The other 2 scouts, momentarily stunned, recovered quickly, circling, trying to flank him. But Volkov was too fast, too skilled, too utterly dominant. He moved with an ancient grace, dodging a clumsy lunge, twisting, and then with a brutal, precise strike, he brought his fist down on the back of one scout's neck. The wolf crumpled, unconscious, a heap on the forest floor. The 3rd scout, eyes wide with terror, hesitated, clearly outmatched. Volkov stood over Cade, his foot planted on the beta's chest, his golden eyes burning with a cold, merciless fury. Cade gasped for air, his face pale, his bravado utterly shattered. Tell your king, Volkov snarled, his voice a low, terrifying growl that resonated through the earth, that Salen is mine, and any who seek to claim her or harm her will meet the same fate as his broken promises. This is my territory, and she is my charge. He pressed his foot down, not hard enough to kill, but hard enough to make Cade whimper, a sound of pure submission. Then, with a final contemptuous look, Volkov lifted his foot, and Cade scrambled backwards, clutching his ribs, his eyes darting to his unconscious comrade. The third scout, seeing his chance, grabbed the fallen beta and, with a terrified glance at Volkov, dragged him into the shadows, disappearing as quickly as they had arrived. The forest settled back into an eerie silence, broken only by Volkov's heavy breathing and Saylin's ragged gasps. She watched him, utterly captivated, her heart hammering. He was magnificent, terrifying, a force of nature. Raythan, with his political maneuvering and carefully cultivated image, seemed small, pathetic, in comparison to Volkov's raw, untamed power. This was a true alpha, one who claimed through strength and ferocity, not through hollow titles and broken vows. He turned to her, his golden eyes still burning with the afterglow of battle, yet softening as they met hers. "Are you harmed?" he asked, his voice rough but laced with a surprising tenderness. He reached out, his large hand gently cupping her jaw, his thumb brushing over the newly awakened mark. The contact sent a jolt of warmth through her, a comforting anchor in the aftermath of the adrenaline. Saylin shook her head, still breathless. "No, I'm fine, but what was that?" she whispered, gesturing vaguely toward the shadows where the scouts had vanished. "Why did they come here?" Volkov's jaw tightened, a hard line etched into his scarred face. Raythan is not a fool, merely arrogant. He would have sensed the shift in the forest, the ripple of awakening power. He would know something has changed, and he fears what he cannot control. He sent them to investigate, to remind me of his dominion, and perhaps to gauge your worthlessness. A mistake, it seems. A dark, dangerous glint entered his eyes. He underestimated you. He underestimated us. He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her, drawing her against his powerful chest. The scent of him, wild earth, ancient forest, and the lingering tang of his adrenaline enveloped her, a potent, intoxicating blend that made her head spin. His heartbeat, strong and steady, pulsed against her ear, a comforting rhythm that calmed the frantic beat of her own. She buried her face in his furs, feeling the raw power of him, the undeniable truth of his claim. This was more than just protection, it was possession, a primal bond forging itself in the heart of the wild. "That mark on your skin, Saylin," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against her hair. "It is not just a sign of your awakening, it is a beacon. It calls to those who recognize true power, and it warns those who would suppress it. Raythan will not be the last to seek you out, but they will learn, as Cade learned, that you are under my protection, under my claim." His words, possessive and absolute, should have terrified her, but instead, they settled into her soul with a strange, profound comfort. After years of feeling invisible, discarded, to be so fiercely claimed, so undeniably seen, was a revelation. Her wolf, now fully awake and vibrant, purred deep within her, a soft, contented rumble that resonated with his own primal force. He tilted her chin up, his golden eyes searching hers, intense and unwavering. "Do you understand, little Alpha? This choice, to walk with me, to awaken your true self, it is a dangerous path, but it is also a path to power, to freedom, and to a bond that will make Raythan's betrayal seem like a child's game." His gaze dropped to her lips, lingering there, and Saylin felt her breath catch in her throat. The memory of his near kiss earlier, interrupted by the scouts, flashed through her mind, now intensified by the adrenaline and the undeniable connection that hummed between them. Her body thrummed, alive with a yearning she had never known, a deep, primal hunger for his touch, his claim. "I understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but resolute. "I choose it. I choose this." She didn't know if she was choosing him, the wild, or the path of the awakened wolf, but in that moment, they were all inextricably linked. Volkov's eyes darkened, a raw, primal desire flaring within their golden depths. He lowered his head slowly, deliberately, giving her every chance to pull away, but Saylin didn't. She leaned into him, her fingers curling into the furs on his chest, her eyes closing as his lips, firm and warm, finally met hers. The kiss was everything she hadn't known she needed. It was wild, fierce, claiming, yet held an underlying tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. It was a kiss of ancient bonds, of awakened power, of two lost souls finding their anchor in the wilderness. His scent enveloped her, intoxicating, dangerous, and utterly right. It was not the gentle caress of a lover. It was the raw, untamed embrace of an alpha claiming his mate, marking her as his own, body and soul. The mark beneath her ear burned, a sweet, fierce fire, and she felt a profound, irrevocable shift deep within her. The world spun, then settled, perfectly aligned, as if this was the destiny she had always been meant for. As their lips parted, his gaze remained locked on hers, burning with a fierce, possessive triumph. "Mine," he murmured, his voice thick with raw emotion, his thumb tracing the newly awakened mark on her jaw. "You are truly mine, Salen, and now the true battle begins." He stepped back, a new resolve in his eyes, a glint of steel that promised retribution. "Wraithen's scouts saw your mark. They will report it, he will know, and he will come. But this time, he will face a true alpha. And a queen who has found her roar." The full moon, now a brilliant orb in the black sky, seemed to swell, pouring its ancient light over them, a silent witness to the primal claim and the inevitable storm that was brewing on the horizon. The taste of Volkov's kiss lingered on Salen's lips, a potent blend of wildness and ancient promise, yet it was swiftly overshadowed by the metallic tang of fear and the acrid scent of adrenaline. Wraithen's scouts had vanished into the shadows, but their presence was a stark warning, a harbinger of the storm to come. The mark beneath Salen's ear throbbed, a living, burning brand, echoing the frantic beat of her heart. She was no longer merely the rejected Omega. She was a beacon, a challenge, and the full weight of that realization settled upon her. Volkov's words, "The true battle begins," echoed in her mind, not as a threat, but as an undeniable truth. Volkov stepped back, his golden eyes, still burning with the aftermath of their kiss, now hardened with grim resolve. His face, usually a mask of rugged stoicism, was etched with a primal alertness. He was a sentinel, a warrior king preparing for war. "They will be back," he stated, his voice a low rumble, devoid of emotion, yet carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Wraithen will not tolerate defiance, not from me, and certainly not from what you have become." He looked at her, his gaze sweeping over her face, lingering on the golden flecks in her eyes, the mark on her jaw. "He will see you as a threat, a blight on his carefully constructed dominion, and he will come for you." Salen met his gaze, her own eyes unwavering. The fear was still there, a cold knot in her stomach, but it was now laced with a fierce, protective defiance she hadn't known she possessed. Her wolf, fully awake and vibrating beneath her skin, urged her to stand, to fight, to protect this formidable alpha who had seen her truth. "Let him come," she murmured, the words surprising even herself with their conviction. "He will find a different Salen." A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched Volkov's scarred lips, a ghost of a smile. "Indeed," he rumbled. He spent the next few hours in a focused, almost meditative state of preparation. He moved with a silent efficiency, checking the perimeters of his hidden den, marking strategic points, and gathering his limited but potent arsenal of hunting knives and ancient bone spears. Salen watched him, absorbing every movement, every subtle shift in his demeanor. He was a creature of instinct, honed by years of survival, a predator who understood the delicate balance between patience and swift, decisive action. He didn't speak much, but his actions were eloquent. He taught her subtle ways to listen to the forest, to read the wind for distant scents, to feel the vibrations of approaching footsteps through the earth. Her senses, now hyper-alert, picked up on things she would have once dismissed. The nervous chatter of squirrels, the sudden silence of the birds, the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the ground that signaled heavy movement. The air, usually just air, now tasted of distant pack, of anger, of a storm brewing on the horizon. As twilight bled into a moonless night, the forest settled into an unnatural quiet. The sounds of distant pack activity had ceased, replaced by a suffocating silence that pressed down on them. "They are close," Volkov murmured, his voice barely a whisper, yet it resonated with an ancient knowing. He stood at the entrance of the cave, his massive form silhouetted against the deepening gloom, his golden eyes piercing the inky blackness. They move silently, Wraithen leads them. A shiver ran down Saylin's spine. Wraithen, the man who had broken her heart, shattered her world, now came as an aggressor, a force of destruction, but the image of him was no longer powerful, no longer intimidating. It was overshadowed by Volkov's presence, by the raw, untamed power radiating from him, a protective shield against the approaching storm. Suddenly, a low, guttural growl echoed through the forest, a sound that was unmistakably Wraithen's. It was a challenge, a declaration, a roar of dominance meant to instill fear and submission. But Volkov did not flinch. Instead, he answered with a deeper, more ancient growl, a sound that seemed to rip from the very bowels of the earth, shaking the ancient trees, reverberating with a primal authority that made Wraithen's challenge sound like a whimper. Saylin felt it deep in her bones, a surge of adrenaline, of fierce loyalty, of a wolf awakening its full power. Then they emerged, not from one direction, but from all sides, a ring of snarling wolves and shifting shifters, their eyes burning with a mixture of aggression and righteous fury. At their head, towering and imposing, was Wraithen. His eyes, usually cold and calculating, blazed with a raw, unbridled rage as they landed on Volkov, then on Saylin. He saw her mark, the golden flecks in her eyes, the subtle shift in her posture, and his face contorted in a mask of disbelief and fury. "Volkov," Wraithen's voice boomed, cutting through the tense silence laced with venom. "You dare to harbor my property? To corrupt one of my own?" His gaze flicked to Saylin, contemptuous and possessive. "And you, Omega, what sorcery has this rogue practiced upon you? You are barren, wolfless, a disgrace." Volkov stepped forward, placing himself fully between Saylin and Wraithen, his posture radiating an unspoken threat. "She is no longer yours, Wraithen," he rumbled, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "She is not property, and she is neither barren nor wolfless. You were simply too blind to see her true power. Too weak to claim it," Wraithen snarled, a visceral sound of pure rage. "She is an Omega, a discard. I merely replaced what was broken with what is strong. Royce is my Luna, my mate, the future of this pack." His eyes widened as they landed on Saylin again, catching the faint shimmer of the mark. "What is that mark? What have you done to her, rogue?" "I have done nothing but awaken what was always hers," Volkov stated, his golden eyes blazing with defiant power. "A true alpha, a queen of the wild. Something your bloodline could never produce, Wraithen. You rule with fear. I rule with ancient truth." Wraithen lunged, his control snapping. He shifted in midair, transforming into a massive dark gray wolf, teeth bared, eyes alight with murderous intent. His pack followed suit. A wave of snarling, shifting forms, their growls a deafening chorus. This was no mere skirmish. This was a war. Volkov met Wraithen's charge head-on, a blur of raw power. He didn't bother to shift fully, preferring the strategic advantage of his human form, but his movements were imbued with the strength and ferocity of his wolf. He moved like a shadow, ducking under Wraithen's snapping jaws, striking with bone-crushing force. The sounds of battle erupted around them. The snarls of wolves, the shouts of shifters, the sickening thud of bodies colliding. Saylin, pushed back by the initial surge, found herself caught between two of Wraithen's wolves. Her heart pounded, but her fear was no longer paralyzing. It was a fuel, an accelerant for the fire raging within her. Her wolf, an undeniable force now, surged, demanding release. The mark on her jaw burned, a fiery current flowing through her veins. She felt the shift begin, a painful, exhilarating stretching of her bones, a primal surge of power. It wasn't a full transformation, not yet, but her vision sharpened, her hearing intensified, and her limbs tingled with an incredible strength. Her nails elongated, becoming claws, her teeth sharpened, and a low, guttural growl ripped from her throat, a sound she had never known she possessed. She met the charge of the first wolf, not with a cower, but with a fierce, defiant roar. She moved instinctively, her body recalling ancient knowledge, dodging a snap, twisting, and then, with a surge of newfound strength, she slammed her forearm into the wolf's jaw. The impact was startling, sending a shockwave through her, but the wolf stumbled back, yelping in surprise and pain. Her golden-flecked eyes blazed, radiating an undeniable alpha command. "Back," she snarled, the word ripping from her, imbued with a power that made the wolf whimper and recoil. The second wolf hesitated, sensing the shift, the undeniable power emanating from her. It was not the scent of an omega. It was the scent of an alpha, raw and untamed. Heightened's pack, trained for rigid hierarchy, felt the disruption, the challenge to their established order. Salen looked towards Volkov, who was locked in a brutal dance with Heightened, a whirlwind of teeth and claws and powerful blows. Heightened, in his fully shifted form, was massive, but Volkov, in his human form, was faster, more cunning, his strikes precise and devastating. He fought with the ferocity of a king, defending his territory, his queen. Then she saw it. Royce, standing at the edge of the clearing, surrounded by a few guards, her face a mask of furious disbelief, her eyes fixed on Salen. She raised a hand, a silent command, and 2 more wolves broke from the main battle, heading directly for Salen, their intent clear: eliminate the threat. Salen's blood ran cold, but the fear was quickly replaced by a white-hot rage. They would not take her. They would not silence her. Her wolf roared, a primal force demanding release. She met the charge of the first wolf, her body moving with a speed and agility she had never known. She ducked, spun, and with a guttural cry, she unleashed a wave of raw, untamed power. It wasn't a physical attack, but an invisible force, a pure alpha command, a shockwave of intent that slammed into the approaching wolves, sending them tumbling back, disoriented and whimpering. Her eyes, now fully golden, locked onto Royce's. "You thought me broken," Salen snarled, her voice imbued with a primal power that seemed to vibrate through the very ground. "You thought me a replacement for the queen you stole? You were wrong. I am the true queen. And this is my claim." As she spoke, the mark on her jaw pulsed with a blinding golden light, radiating outwards, engulfing her in a shimmering aura. Her wolf, fully awake, fully present, surged, and for a fleeting moment, Salen felt the full, exhilarating power of her transformation. She was not just human, not just wolf. She was something more, something ancient and powerful, a true alpha. The battle paused, every eye, even Heightened's, turning to Salen. The raw, untamed power emanating from her was undeniable, a force that demanded reverence, submission. Heightened, momentarily distracted, faltered, and Volkov seized the opportunity. With a powerful roar, he delivered a crushing blow that sent Heightened sprawling, shifting back to his human form with a pained grunt. Heightened lay on the ground, defeated, his wolf whimpering, his dominance shattered. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. Volkov stood over Heightened, his golden eyes blazing with triumph, but also with something colder, something that promised a reckoning. The remaining pack members, their aggression replaced by stunned awe and fear, slowly shifted back to human form, their eyes darting between their defeated Alpha King and the radiant figure of Salen, shimmering with newfound power. Volkov turned to Salen, his gaze softening, a deep, profound pride filling his golden eyes. He walked towards her, his powerful frame radiating a silent strength, and took her hand. The moment their skin met, the golden aura around Salen faded, the mark on her jaw settling into a soft, steady glow. She was still Salen, but irrevocably changed. Heightened pushed himself up, his face contorted in a mask of defeat and seething hatred. His eyes, still blazing with a dangerous fury, landed on Salen, then on Volkov's intertwined hand with hers. "This isn't over, rogue," he spat, his voice hoarse, raw with defeat. "You may have stolen my Luna, but you cannot steal my crown, and you, Omega. You will never rule. This power you possess, it will consume you. It will be your undoing. The wild always devours its own." He stared at Volkov, a dark, knowing glint in his eyes. "And you, Volkov, you think you've won? You forget the price of ancient blood. The whispers, they've already begun. Your past will claim you, and your new queen will watch you fall." With a final venomous glare, Heightened turned and, with the remnants of his shattered pack, retreated into the darkness of the forest, leaving behind a silence thick with the echoes of his chilling prophecy and the unsettling truth that their victory might just be the beginning of a far greater, more ancient war. The silence that followed Rethan's retreat was not the oppressive quiet of fear, but the deep, resonant peace of an ancient forest reclaiming its dominion after a brutal storm. The scent of blood and fear slowly dissipated, replaced by the crisp, clean tang of pine and damp earth, mingled with the potent, comforting musk of Volkov. Salen stood amidst the lingering shadows of the battle, her heart still thrumming with the raw power of her awakened wolf, the mark beneath her ear radiating a steady, warm glow. Rathan's chilling prophecy, "Your past will claim you, and your new queen will watch you fall," echoed, a dark counterpoint to their hard-won victory, yet it lacked the sting of true malice. It felt like the desperate gasp of a defeated king, clinging to a power that had already slipped from his grasp. Volkov turned to her, his golden eyes, once blazing with battle fury, now softened into pools of profound tenderness. He reached for her, his large, scarred hands cupping her face, his thumbs gently tracing the line of her jaw, the faint pulse of the awakening mark. "My queen," he murmured, his voice a low, reverent rumble, devoid of the roughness she had first heard. It was a sound of absolute devotion, of a fierce, protective love that resonated through every fiber of her being. Salen leaned into his touch, her own hands rising to grip his powerful forearms. The connection between them was no longer nascent. It was a fully formed, unbreakable bond, forged in fire and defiance. She could feel his strength, his ancient wisdom, his quiet, unwavering loyalty, not just to her, but to the wild spirit they both embodied. Her wolf, now fully integrated, purred deep within her, a contented rumble that answered his own primal hum. In the days that followed, the true meaning of Rethan's words and Volkov's hidden past slowly unfurled. Volkov, it turned out, was not merely a rogue, but the last living descendant of the ancient High Kings, a lineage that predated Rethan's by centuries. His family had been guardians of the true wild, their power drawn not from political alliances, but from an intrinsic bond with the earth and its creatures. Rathan's ancestors, ambitious and cunning, had usurped the throne generations ago, rebranding the wild ways as savage and dangerous, driving Volkov's line into exile, into the deepest, most forbidden parts of the forest. The scars on Volkov's face and body were not just from random skirmishes. They were the legacy of a brutal, lifelong battle against those who sought to extinguish his line, to erase the very memory of the true kings. He was a survivor, a keeper of ancient knowledge, a king who had chosen the freedom of the wild over the gilded cage of a stolen throne. "They called me rogue, cursed," Volkov explained one evening, as they sat by the fire in his den, the embers casting dancing shadows on his scarred face. His eyes, fixed on the flames, held a distant, ancient pain. "They feared my blood, the whispers of my true claim. They wanted me to fall, to be consumed by the wild they condemned. But the wild, it nourished me. It taught me patience. It taught me strength." He turned to Salen, his golden eyes filled with a fierce tenderness. "And it led me to you, my unawakened queen, the one they dismissed, because they could not see the crown you carried within." Salen, no longer the timid Omega, listened with a deep understanding. Her own journey, from humiliation to awakening, mirrored his in a profound way. They were both outcasts, both survivors, both reclaimed by the very wildness that others feared. Her mark, now a permanent, shimmering spiral beneath her ear, was a constant reminder of her true nature, a source of unwavering strength. Her golden-flecked eyes, once a subtle change, now gleamed with the undeniable authority of an alpha, the raw wisdom of a queen. Their den, once a solitary refuge, slowly began to transform. The forest, having witnessed their triumph, seemed to hum with new life. Animals, once wary, now approached with a curious boldness, sensing the benevolent power emanating from Volkov and Salen. And then, a few days after Rethan's defeat, the first of the lost and disillusioned arrived. Shifters who had felt the stifling weight of Rathan's rigid rule, Omegas who had been scorned, Betas who yearned for a truer, more primal connection to their wolves. They came, drawn by the whispers of a new kind of alpha, a true alpha who valued strength, not just in tooth and claw, but in spirit and loyalty. They did not form a traditional pack, not in the way Rathan's territory operated. Volkov and Salen ruled not with fear, but but with wisdom, guidance, and a deep reverence for the wild. They taught the newcomers to hunt, to track, to listen to the ancient rhythms of the forest. Ceylin, in particular, blossomed into her role as Luna, her empathy and quiet strength balancing Volkov's raw power. She learned to shift fully, her wolf a magnificent silver-gray creature, silent and swift, its golden eyes mirroring her human form. Her shifts were no longer painful, but exhilarating, a seamless merging with her primal self. The bond between Volkov and Ceylin deepened with every passing day, a profound, soul-deep intimacy that transcended words. Their nights were filled with the primal comfort of shared furs, the raw passion of two wolves finally finding their true mate. Their love was fierce, untamed, built on mutual respect and an undeniable, ancient connection that resonated through their very beings. He was her anchor, her guide, her king of the wild. She was his queen, his solace, the one who had awakened his hope after centuries of solitary struggle. Rathan's prophecy, "Your past will claim you," proved to be true, but not in the way he intended. Volkov's past, his ancient lineage, did claim him, not as a curse, but as a rightful inheritance. He embraced his role as the true alpha of the wild, his wisdom guiding his growing number of followers, creating a sanctuary where all wolves, even the supposedly wolfless or barren, could find their true strength. And Ceylin, his queen, stood by his side, her own past of humiliation transformed into a powerful foundation for her reign. She had watched him fall indeed. She had watched Rathan fall from grace, fall from power, fall from his stolen throne, defeated not by force alone, but by the undeniable truth of a bond he had foolishly cast aside. Roas, it was said, returned to her Northern Peaks pack, disgraced and stripped of her false title, her ambition having led her to ruin. Rathan, stripped of his perceived dominance, and now haunted by the growing legend of the Wild King and his Alpha Queen, found his own pack slowly dwindling, their loyalty eroded by his cruelty and his inability to truly lead. The whispers in the forest were no longer of his power, but of the formidable pair who ruled the ancient woods, whose bond was forged in primal fire, and whose strength grew with every dawn. One morning, as the sun painted the forest in hues of gold and amber, Ceylin stood with Volkov on a high, rocky outcrop overlooking their expanding territory. Below them, a small group of shifters, their faces alight with purpose, moved through the trees, learning, growing, thriving under their guidance. The air was alive with the scent of wild freedom, of promise, of belonging. Volkov turned to her, his golden eyes gleaming with a love so profound it took her breath away. He took her hand, intertwining their fingers, and brought her knuckles to his lips, a gesture of quiet reverence. "The dawn has been claimed, my Ceylin," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "And with it, our destiny." Ceylin smiled, her heart overflowing. She was no longer waiting in the quiet, no longer guarding an empty space. She was standing in the full light of her own power, beside the Alpha who had seen her truth, the one who had taught her to roar. Her crown was not of jewels or gold, but forged in the fire of betrayal and the strength of the wild. Her kingdom was this boundless forest, and her reign, alongside Volkov, was one of undeniable, primal truth. The future stretched before them, vast and untamed, a canvas waiting for their shared story, a testament to a love that was as ancient and unyielding as the mountains themselves.